Winner of 8 Academy Awards in 2024, Gone with the Wind turned 85. And I haven't talked about it on my channel yet, and it has audio description. So let's go. What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from ActMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And I'm stepping into Gone with the Wind, the film classic based on Margaret Mitchell's classic novel. All of these things are still true. They can all be true. Winner of 8 Academy Awards. And that has stirred a little bit of controversy. I'll say that I remember when Max launched and this movie was we were having our moment of peak wokeism. And there was like an intro to the movie that was like letting people know like the historical, like I don't know, like this is how things were in 1939. I don't know how to say, because I didn't watch the movie back then, but there was some sort of like thing that they put before the movie. I didn't have that, or it's not audio described. They've either removed it or it's not audio described. So mine just goes straight into the movie, which the audio description is done by Descriptive Video Service, WGBH, which I believe is now Media Access Group, because I always hear Media Access Group, WGBH, which used to do a lot of audio description through Department of Education. And it's funny that a lot of that education stuff it kind of disappeared, but some people are still using it. Like I already did a anniversary for the Santa Claus, and that was one that Disney Plus is using the Department of Education's one on as well. I'm not mad that the Department of Education paid for audio description for this. Like, this makes sense to me, because when you think about it on a broader level, historical purposes and everything, this is a pretty big movie to just kind of continue to sidestep for the rest of humanity. And I have a lot of thoughts on this movie. Have I ever seen Gone with the Wind before? Yes. I watched it one time on cable a long time ago. I would say probably close to 30 years ago, when I was sort of getting interested in film. Sort of once I got past 10, I started looking at films that weren't originally made for kids. And I started going down to the library and renting a whole bunch of like old, whatever they had down there, watched a whole bunch of Hitchcock movies. And I started paying attention to AMC. I was paying attention to when the AFI was releasing their lists and everything, and seeing what I was supposed to watch. I was still a kid, so like I wasn't allowed to watch certain movies. But yeah, so I remember one time catching Gone with the Wind on AMC or Turner Classic Movies or whatever, and just not being here for it, and just but still sitting through it and being like, well, if I sit through this, at least I can say I've done it. And visually, the Technicolor aspect of it was kind of cool. Like, it was kind of pretty to look at, especially for its time. It has that same sort of look as Wizard of Oz, you know? So it does. And for a 1939 film too, this feels like one of those like major budget movies. Like they did a lot. So it looks excellent for its time period. It has a couple different directors credited, including Victor Fleming and George Cukor are directors for this. Years later, tackling this movie is long as hell. And for streaming, because you can just pause the movie, I didn't get an intermission. So, I mean, it might have, but it didn't even, in the audio description, at no point did it say this is where the intermission is. But there's a point where the music is clearly building to something, and it feels like we come back from something. Almost like if you're watching a stage play or a musical or something like that. And it was about at the time that I would have expected the intermission to be. But still, this movie is long and just ever-loving shit, and it just moves so slowly. This is why people are breaking things into parts, and part one and part two is because they're like, But can anybody sit through things like Gone with the Wind anymore in theaters is the question. And I did watch this in one sitting. I did not pause it. I did not come back to it later. I allowed the experience to wash over me. Um, my hottest of hot takes before we dive into anything having to do with content is I actually don't like Vivian Lee's performance. I think she delivers every line the exact same way with the exact same level of exasperation. She's always just very just, and every single sequence she's like, oh, I can't believe, why would he do that? I don't understand what's going on. I must go over. I have to do this. I have to. Everything is. Oh, it's just. My life is a Scarlett O'Hara. It's just like this. And for three and a half hours plus, it is exhausting. It is exhausting. And I know people acted, and like there's a sort of a different beat to the way acting is. But aside from, is that character's name Prissy? Aside from Prissy, there was no other character that annoyed me in this film. I don't know what's going on with her voice, but Prissy, just every time she spoke, I was like, I don't understand. I'm so sorry for your voice. I just think that's her natural voice. But, yeah. And my initial reaction when people were trying to like cancel Gone with the Wind is we have to be really careful because Gone with the Wind, whether you like it or not, is going to be an important film in cinema because of Hattie McDaniel. It just is. Like that's a big win. It's a shit role, but she is really good in it. If you're gonna get offered a shit role, you might as well knock it out of the park. I loved Hattie McDaniel in this way more than I did. She attacks every single line. She's fiery. She's got a lot of spunk to her. You know what I'm saying? Like I thought she was great. I was far more interested in her character, and I was just wishing that she wasn't just such like a walking stereotype. But I was like, no wonder she won the supporting actress Oscar. She's just eating every scene that she's in. I thought she was great. I thought Clark Gable was better than Vivian Leigh too. He comes in and he's just got a different vibe. Really, everybody has a different vibe. Olivia de Havilland has a different vibe. Everybody just has a different beat to them in this. Than she's exhausting for 3.5 hours. I just can't with her. By the time when you get down to frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. I was just like I stopped giving a damn about Scarlett O'Hara about 30 minutes into the movie. I was like, I don't care what happens to her. Who loves her? I don't care if she ends up like married, not married. I'd forgotten how this movie ends. It's been a long time and I've only seen this movie once. So, and I never read the book. It's never compelled me. But I would never stop anybody from saying Gone with the Wind is a film classic because just because you don't like things that are old does not mean that they're not classics. You know what I'm saying? Like there are a whole bunch of books that are older, there are a whole bunch of movies that are older. There are people who wouldn't watch silent film, but that doesn't mean we just throw out silent film and be like, well, sorry, Charlie Chaplin. Sorry, Buster Keaton. You guys didn't contribute to cinema. We've moved beyond you. So, I think, Gone with the Wind, and it's not Birth of a Nation. Like, there's a distinct difference between those two films. It's not far from Birth of a Nation, but it's also not Birth of a Nation. So, there's that. It is very rooted in this sort of the South will rise again, or the way things used to be. Oh, the South wasn't that bad. We were really nice to Black people. They enjoyed their jobs. Actually, every time the audio description track, here's my hot take, descriptive video service. Fuck you. Every single time that they used the word, here's why, and maybe I'm wrong, because I also I also will say that having seen this film once before, I can't remember who is in what scene, and it totally feels like with the way that they interact with black people in certain scenes that they could have totally done this, where they're like, oh no, there were white people working in the fields too. So they use the word slave a couple of times, but then they also use words like field hand, and I was like, no, the word is slave. They were still a slave. That's Field hand's not a thing. Slave is a thing. Like, these people were slaves. I don't know why we're in this weird part of history where we don't like to talk about certain things because it makes us uncomfortable. But it's like that's what history is. It's a lot of being uncomfortable. Like when you learn about why something is the way that it is or where it came from, or um even things that are totally benign, when you uh there's always something to it. When you learn about when you sneeze and somebody says bless you, do you know why they say that? Do you know the history of that? Because if you learn it, you'll know why. And you always have to kind of look back on things and say, well, this is what came before it. So the fact that we're like trying to rewrite our textbooks and be like, well, slavery was beneficial for black. No, it fucking wasn't. Like, take all the people who are trying to say that, make those people slaves, and then see how beneficial they think that is. You know, like, oh yeah, let me own you. Uh, where you have to do everything that I say, or I'll kill you, and then I can because you're my property, and nobody can do anything about it. It's just, it's like it's so ridiculous. Um, so to see this sort of revisionist era look be a classic film, yeah, it's uncomfortable. Of course, it's uncomfortable. Unfortunately, that's where we are. And in order for film to be able to progress, in order for you to know where things are, you have to be able to look at the past, and you have to be able to look at things that make you uncomfortable. You have to be able to watch things that weren't perfect, that where history wasn't great. You know what I'm saying? For the same reasons that we argue that we can't erase slavery from history, we also can't erase Gone with the Wind, nor can we erase Birth of a Nation from film history. Those films still have a place, and in kind of an important place too, because if you don't know why we're not doing certain things anymore, if we just all act like those things never happened, it's sort of like pretending that the civil rights movement never happened, Like, at what point are we just going to be like, oh yeah, well, everything's been peachy keen. Since when? Things aren't even peachy keen now. Don't you? It's like playing dominoes with one domino. Like, you just flip the domino over and you're like, this is a fun game. It's like, well, actually, you're supposed to play with multiple dominoes because one hits the other one and the other one, you sort of see the progression of the dominoes, but you're choosing to play dominoes with one domino. So if you don't know what came before it, if you can't analyze things, then what's the point? Why are you here? Why are we doing any of this? So yeah, for people who are interested in film, they should absolutely have access to Gone with the Wind. I'd be a little concerned with people who are obsessed with Gone with the Wind, especially considering how old it is, because we're starting to run out of people who were around when Gone with the Wind came out and remember it from its theatrical release. Those people are starting to fade away, and seems like a weird film to suddenly start being obsessed with unless you have reasons. So, uh, it's a weird film to get behind. Um, but it does have audio description, even though it occasionally likes to try to pretend, like the movie's trying to pretend, that black people were on some sort of like equal footing. I will say that they use the term darkies in this movie. Uh, okay. I feel like that was their way of like somehow acknowledging that racial slurs happened back then, but also there aren't racial slurs in here. So it feels very weird. It feels very much like they thought they were somehow being progressive, but yet they were still adapting something that was decidedly not. So obviously, because like George Cukor, he wasn't he would have wanted to make progressive cinema anyway. The kind of stuff that he would go on to make after this, uh, I mean, he he continued to move Hollywood forward. He wasn't doing this from a place of the South will rise again. These people are not. Um, but at the same time, so that's why you don't have some of the things, but it kind of also it makes it non-realistic to not have to just be feeling like you're dodging that the whole time. Um, but still, this is like what, some 20 plus years after Birth of a Nation, so we've come a long way, I guess, since that. That fucking movie, that's a sit through. That's a I can't recommend Birth of a Nation, but I unfortunately, and I had to watch that in film school too, and it's just oof. That's a movie. But no, I just yeah. So I don't want to cancel Gone with the Wind because I think uh, part of education, part of learning, is being able to look at and learn things that are uncomfortable. It's why I'm against banning books. It's why I'm against all that kind of stuff too. Like, I wouldn't ban this movie. There are movies that I've done reviews of where people are pushing back, where I'm saying this movie doesn't play well anymore. Um, like Euro Trip. Somebody's like, I don't know what you're talking. People, the election showed that people like offensive comedy. You don't like Dave Chappelle, do you? I was like, well, I listen to Dave Chappelle. I wish he would make trans jokes. He knows what he's doing. And if the roles were reversed and there was a trans comedian making black jokes, he'd be the first one to stand up and be like, this is inappropriate. Find me a white trans comic making black jokes and see what his reaction is. So, I mean, like, if the roles were reversed, he would be, he stands on the tower of comedy as comedy, but I guarantee you he would flip real fast if he was on the receiving end. So that's how things work. Is we don't like being made fun of, and so we don't like seeing our culture on display. We don't like being trolled in comment sections. We don't like those kinds of things. They make us uncomfortable. But if you're always comfortable, you're never growing. You're never learning what other things were. You never know why anybody else is ever uncomfortable. You can't ever relate to anybody else. You don't know what anybody else is like living through, what their experiences are like. So you almost have to make yourself uncomfortable in order to really be able to experience things. And if somebody is coming up to me and saying, hey, I want to do what you do. I'm young, I'm getting into film. Where should I start? I wouldn't stop them from this. I would reference, I'd be like, well, here are all the lists of all the old movies. And they'd be like, oh, but Gone with the Wind is on here. We don't watch that anymore, do we? I'd be like, yeah, we still do. And you should still watch it. You shouldn't just watch movies that, if you're trying to educate yourself, you shouldn't just watch the movies that make you comfortable. You should, at least try to watch the things that make you uncomfortable. It's sort of a theory that I hated and also learned in film school when I had to watch Salo, which I did not want to watch. I knew what the fuck it was before I went into it. And until it made me like physically ill, I I watched Salo to a point and then I left because I was like, thought I was gonna throw up. I it's like, no, I'm out. Um, but yeah, no, I sat through it. I made it a good while into a movie I wasn't gonna watch otherwise, because if I don't know what some of these things are, if I don't jump into cinema that I would normally not watch or choose to watch myself, that isn't fun for me, that isn't like a comfort film, then what's the point? What am I doing here? Then I'm just analyzing a certain thing. Like, it's cool that there are horror-centric film critics, but I hope they've seen other things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they should, because Otherwise, they're just sort of commenting on one thing. You can be niche, but you should also have an understanding of what is around you. Because oftentimes horror movies end up referencing things that come in and out from other genres. They don't specifically take from one genre all the time. So you should have an understanding of other things around so that you can understand the references and homage and stuff like that to, I pronounced the word wrong the first time, to other styles. So with Gone with the Wind, yeah, it's still there. Yeah, it's on Max. You can watch it. If you're trying to consider yourself to be like some sort of, I don't know, film nerd, film buff, critic, whatever, you should watch it. And if you're blind, there's really no excuse because Max is running it with audio description. It's long as fuck. You don't have to like it. And you can use this experience to write a thing about it. If you do like Gone with the Wind, I'm sad for you. There are worse things you could like, I guess, because again, I've seen Birth of a Nation, which is really hard to get through and is even more problematic. I don't think that movie has audio description. I really don't want to watch that movie again in my lifetime. I don't think it streams anywhere. I don't think anybody wants to touch that movie, to be totally honest, because it's been used as a Klan recruitment movie. But this is the Best Picture winner. There are a lot of people who watch every single Best Picture winner. You'd have to watch this one. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can't sidestep. And also, we really should not be discrediting this film just for Hattie McDaniel. I mean, she broke ground, first African-American actress to win an Oscar in any category, first person of color to win an Oscar. So, of course, it would be years before anybody would repeat that. And it's not a great role to win for. But is she great? She's great. Like, she's great in it. And I can't even try to put myself in the mindset of Hattie and the kinds of roles that she was likely offered back then, before this and after this. Like how little, we think about it nowadays and how we have black leads and everything, and directors and people are controlling the stories and the narratives and producers. Hattie didn't have those choices, Of course, Hattie wasn't allowed into the Dolby Theater. She had to wait outside. She wasn't allowed in with everybody else. She attended the ceremony. She had to wait outside. When she won her Oscar, they let her in, and then she left. But she wasn't allowed to sit with everybody else in the audience. So, there's so much about Gone with the Wind, in and around it, in and around the filmmaking, the story, that I'm glad this film is out there. I'm glad people have access to it. It's not something that I'm not grading it, because my grade would not reflect anything having to do with what this film was like in 1939. It obviously has a lot of social connotation to it, but at the same time, there is craft that's done here, done by cinematographers, and the score is lovely. The score is lovely regardless of what the movie is trying to say or do. I wish it wouldn't have some of those Dixie songs in it, but when it doesn't have the Dixie songs, the score is lovely, minus the Stephen Foster stuff. But yeah, yes, Gone with the Wind, it exists and it should still exist. If you were a literature major and you read Mein Kampf, I wouldn't blink. If you were like, I'm a literature major and I read all these things and I've read Mein Kampf, I'd be like, okay. Now, if you start talking to me about Mein Kampf like it's your favorite novel of all time, I'm gonna be a little concerned. But the fact that you've read it, when you're telling me that that's your thing, I've read thousands of books, including, some really edgy titles. It's not gonna, I'm like, okay, well, that's your thing. You're obviously, you're out there reading, Machiavelli and stuff like that. It's just, that's what you're doing. I get it. but it's when you make it your life that I would be concerned. So it's 85 years. I don't know who's still like, who's deeply obsessed with Scarlett O'Hara still at this point. And I really found her to be, I would not have given her the Oscar for this. Even looking at the film and trying to be like, okay, well, if I accept the fact that this film is very like, the South will rise again, you know, this is clearly uh, Blanche's favorite film, Blanche from the Golden Girls. I'm sure this is her favorite movie. Um, but uh, even if I take all that out of here and look at it, everything sort of like technically, objectively as possible, I still don't like her performance. I don't know. So yeah, that's it. I got nothing else. I wish the audio description track was not using job titles and had the boldness and the audacity to just use the right word every single time. Every single time somebody's on stage, they're always a slave. Use that term. It'll make people uncomfortable, but that's what history is. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable that in World War II, at the same time when we were fighting a power that was putting people into internment camps, we were putting people into internment camps. Some shit is what we've done to Native Americans in this country is, you know, it makes you uncomfortable. But if you pretend it never happened, then that doesn't do anything for you anyway, you know. So um, being uncomfortable is a part of life. I'm frequently uncomfortable as a blind person, so all the time, just, you know, in many situations, live with it. So no, we're not canceling Gone with the Wind. But yes, it's problematic as hell. It's also long as shit. And that's that. Gone with the Wind. 85 years of it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.